Anyhow, let's move on to the jet ski engine installation, which you can see we're set. And I want you to note, let's see how this, I've got it back as far as it'll go. This thing's, it's so easy with this plate to just slide right into the PTO. Now you'll notice the bolt isn't centered. Now I could move it forward and center it, but I don't want to do that because I want this all the way butted up against the PTO shaft. So it's going to sit a little off center, just as long as you can get all your bolts in. And these do have Loctite. I need to go ahead and find the torque specs for you, which I'll get, and then we'll get along to putting those in. And you'll note that I have all of my ports covered so that nothing drops down into my engine build. Like, look, you got little things that'll fall and that sort of thing. So you always want to cover those up. Tape would probably be better, but just stuffing a rag in it will work. Moving on. Okay, so we got the torque wrench ready. You got to, unless you've got one really long extension, you're gonna have to put several short ones together. Makes the job a little easier, so you're working out here with your wrench going in and tightening these bolts in. I've Loctited up my bolts. Now, one of the things that's going to confuse you, if you should go to Google the Kawasaki torque specs for the engine mounts, there's going to be 3 different torques that it's going to give you. One of them is the engine mount bolt, engine bed bolts, and then there's another one. I've forgotten it because I don't have it. I pulled it up on the phone and looked at it. Anyway, there's 3 different specs. The first one being 33. That 33 is for mounting the metal plate to the bottom of the engine. You're mounting that plate, okay? Then you've got one that'll tell you 11.5. Well, if you think about it logically, the smaller bolts, which are the ones, I think they call them engine bed bolts, and then engine mount bolts. These are the mount bolts because they're mounting the engine to the jet ski, okay? This is your engine bed bolts and then engine mount. They've got 3 different ones. But the smaller bolt is going to be the 11.6, which I never took those out, so I don't have to retorque them. But this one is 11.6 foot-pounds for your engine mount bolts, because your bolts that mount your engine mount into the ski. Then there's it's kind of confusing. The 33 foot-pounds is for the ones that bolt this plate physically to the bottom of this engine, and then 27 foot-pounds for these that go in here to secure the engine bed to the mount, if that makes sense at all. So let's talk just a second about the engine mount bolts. They're 14 millimeter, and they've got this double thick washer. And I don't know whether many of you know it or not, but a washer, just like the engine studs, has 2 sides. This is flat, and this has a rounded side. Your flat side goes down, okay? That's it. And that's the way you input them in. Rounded side up, flat side down. There you go. Okay, so what you want to do, you've got to tighten your these are 14 millimeter. If you loosened them on all of these for your adjustments, this is how you adjust your choke length and your throttles on the bottom, throttle cables on the bottom of the bracket. This is just the oil cable. Those are all 14 millimeter nuts. All the mount bolts are in. You want to get your hose staged, ready to go, so that you slip this straight back onto your hose, tighten your clamps, do the 2 bolts that hold this piece in, and get ready to install your exhaust gaskets. So we will do that now. All right, I guess this is part of what they call the expansion chamber that I'm putting on the this piece here. Just make sure all of your wiring is up out of the bottom of the ski, because it ties along these points here. In other words, if I left this in the bottom, it's going to be hard to get it to pull through that little crack right there to get it up high. Kawasaki tied the wiring up high to keep it out of the water in case you got water inside the ski. This probably would be easier. I went ahead and bolted the hose up first. This is going to be easier to install if you don't. If you put these two bolts and get them started first. This back one didn't want to go in because I was really having to lift up on the lower part to get this to line up. You better get these started with your fingers so that you don't cross thread the bolts when you're going in with these two exhaust expansion chamber bolts. So going to the Kawasaki Ski Clinic, on Google search torque specs, they're calling this the exhaust pipe, and this the expansion chamber. Expansion chamber mounting bolts would be these two. That's 36 foot-pounds or 49 Newton meters. Same for these bolts here. They're all the same thickness of bolt, although the lengths they vary because you've got some long ones on here. But it's obvious which ones they are because there they are. Blue Loctite on all of those, 36 foot-pounds. Don't forget your gaskets. I've got to go get mine. 36 foot-pounds, 49 Newton meters. Those will be installed. Forgot to mention, you may want to go ahead and get this line. Actually, you do. It's a lot easier to get it bolted up while this top piece is still off. Go ahead and put this little line that runs to your top fitting off of that stator cover hooked up to your expansion chamber. Make your life a little bit easier, and that'll be great. Also, you may want to go ahead and wire tie all of your wiring before you put this little hump in too. It's just easier to get to the attachment points. And I will say this also, these attachment points tend to come unglued. Clean your both surfaces, the back of this and the jet ski, with acetone, and get you some epoxy, some 2-part epoxy. They do make marine epoxy, and re-stick those. And you might want to hold them in place with tape while the epoxy's drying, and that's how you can repair those. You'll find them attached. They'll either fall down in the hull or they'll be attached to the cable bundle still with a wire tie. But they always, I've never seen one of these where they haven't come undone. So that's the deal on their epoxy. It always seems to come loose. Okay, I bundled my wires, got them ready to go. The factory wiring will be all nice and color coded so that you can't make any dumb mistakes hooking it back up. You've got to hook up your battery cable. No, let's back up here. Starter cable goes on the bottom. That's the battery cable. Your solenoid is underneath this. So if you ever get just a click, click, click in your jet ski, your solenoid is inside this watertight box, and that could be your problem. First thing I would check is battery. Second thing would be all the connections. Make sure they're tight and no corrosion on your cables. Then I would go for the solenoid. And I'm sure online there's instructions on how to test the solenoid to be sure whether it's good or not. But it's fairly straightforward to put the wiring back. Like I said, it's color coded. You've got the 4 bolts that bolt your box down. main electrical box, which I took out because I was worried about a leak, which I floated for an entire day, this hull by itself, and had no leaks. So hopefully when I run the engine, it won't have leaks, which would mean there's a hose leaking or something else wrong. But the 4 bolts that hold it down to the frame have a little tit on the box, and they're longer than the rest of the 10 millimeters that hold it. And people always wonder what these things are for right here. Those pieces that are sticking up. Well, that's to put your spark plug boot on and ground it out. That's what they're there for. Okay? That's what they're there for. Anyway, I'm going to get this all bolted back down. The battery cable goes through this nice little tie thing that they have here. I won't be installing the battery till the very last, but slowly but surely getting it all back together.